is that there's no one in this committee that believes that children should have access to materials that are inappropriate for their age. There is no one that believes that children should have access to inappropriate pornographic materials. This, to me, is about something deeper that's going on in the American culture right now that is really troubling. And that's why I want to pick up where he talked about what's going on in our schools. I actually agree with Ranking Member Graham that I don't see much Congress can do. We will make no laws addressing this. But I do think it's important that we hold a committee like this to talk to these larger issues. We have a country right now that is based in the ideals of a commitment to one another. We weren't founded on sameness, same religion, same ethnicity. We were founded on big principles of democratic ideals. And in a diverse democracy, it is so necessary that we know each other, that we see each other, that we understand each other. That's what makes us stronger. And in many ways, our schools become areas, especially the ideals of public schools, where diverse people come together for an education. I am suspect of these books being taken out of libraries and schools because I started seeing books that had been there not just for years, but for decades, literally generations, 25, 30, 40-year-old books on shelves suddenly being taken off. Stunned that there were books that were important to me when I was growing up. My parents in 1969 had to fight a court case, had to go to do legal fights to get into the town I grew up in. We were the first black family ever to move in. They had to get a white couple that opposes them to buy the home to move into the community. As I grew up, as my father used to call us, 4 raisins in a tub of sweet vanilla ice cream. And for me, finding certain books on my library shelf that not only gave me an affirmation, but a celebration that expanded my understanding of history, they were anchors to me, lifelines in some ways. And at a time that I was forming my self-concept and my sense of self-worth, these were the books that became the foundation of who I am. Some of the greatest works of American literature. And so when I see books by some of the greatest authors, I see Frederick Douglass there, being taken off the shelf, that's when I begin to worry that we're falling into this trap where we are failing to do what is necessary in a democracy, was to create public forums, educational pathways that engender empathy and understanding, that engender deep knowledge, that engender the kind of sentiment that is necessary for democratic democracies to exist. Not a culture of contempt for one another, but a deeper culture of understanding. Now, I had conversations with my parents as I got older and more sophisticated, like, wow, you brought up 2 black boys in a predominantly white community. What were you thinking then? And we talked about a lot of the books that we read at home and read at school, and she would laugh at me right now and say, of course, I could have bought you those books if they were removed from the library, but what was important to have them in the library wasn't for you, it was for your peers, for them to have access. I remember the power of reading Invisible Man in my high school English class and the impact it had on my peers. I had the most nurturing, positive community to grow up in, but to hear what they experienced, expanding their understanding. I remember when I was a college student, counseling on a suicide crisis hotline to LGBTQ youth coming out who were considering suicide. And the power of just knowing they weren't alone, that there were other people sharing that experience. And so a lot is talked about today, but there are deeper issues of what kind of culture are we going to promote in our country? One of compassion, of empathy, of understanding, or one that is going to continue this false narrative of us versus them? Professor Knox, in the remaining seconds that I have, I actually think there's a problem when we are attacking our own history and trying to Disneyify it, as opposed to celebrating what was a rough, difficult, uncomfortable, messy American history. That what makes us even greater is the fact that we had a history that we had to overcome, but that there is some negativity when young people are learning a history that is bereft of the complications and the difficulties of race issues, of gender issues, of LGBTQ issues. Is there a danger in giving people a sanitized version of American history?
Absolutely, there is. It is important that we know the truth of our history. There was a time when I would not have been able to sit here in this hearing to speak to this committee. We've grown from that, but it is important that people know that we have a history of trauma in our country that we have overcome for some people, but we gain nothing by not telling our children the truth of genocide and slavery and Jim Crow. We gain nothing if we don't tell people the truth about that history. And this is one concern I have about many of the books that are being challenged right now, is that people want to sanitize this history and say, well, it was all in the past, or even if it was all in the past, it's too painful to discuss. It may be painful, but it is still the truth, and it must be said. It is important to be citizens of this great country, that we know where we came from, so we can make the world better as we go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. I might say that there's a vote on, and I may have to leave and recess for a few minutes, but Senator from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you.